What's up, my W's? It's D from Mtg down there, and today we got a hot Bant control deck for you, but don't click away just yet, because this one's a little bit different than you might be expecting. So let's roll the intro. We'll see you on the other side. Now here's the thing about this Bant control deck. See, there are no fogs, there are no Nexus of Fates, and there are no Teferis. Now, most of my audience in the Magic world at this point is completely turned off by the idea of Turbo Fog in general, but most of my audience, it seems, is also completely repulsed by the mere presence of Teferi in a deck, because there's no reason that a card should cost $50 in Standard and be like an auto playset in every deck that it's in, because the deck's built around the card and all that stuff. But I also know that there's a portion of my audience that's more spike-minded, and they're in the comment section right now already typing like there's no way that blue-white can win without Teferi. So I know that this is a polarizing idea, but I wanted to stretch my legs, try some new options and stuff, and see what we can do in Bant without iced tea. So that begs the question, what do we do? Well, again, I wanted to try some new stuff out here, have some fun, and more importantly, play some cards that actually win us the game. That's good, right? So what did we end up on here? Well, I tried so many things. I've been actually building this deck since like the beginning of the season, but what we actually ended up on here, get ready for it, is Murmuring Mystic.
Mumbler!
Now, this card started showing up in Sideboards at the Pro Tour, and I can see why. It does a lot of different things. The 5 toughness allows it to block a lot of important threats in this format and survive. Venerated Loxodon, one of the best examples, but there's a lot of creatures this blocks and survives against, and it doesn't die to a whole lot of removal. Red removal can barely touch this outside of Fight with Fire, and it makes little bird dudes that can both like block flyers, angels, and other flying creatures in this format, or, you know, later on in the game, once you've played a few spells, it starts looking like a Hitchcock film. You know, you can form the Flying V and just get in on the opponent. We're playing over 20 instants and sorceries in this deck, so it's not too hard to get a team of Mighty Ducks together. And once you do have like 3-4 birds out, you suddenly become the aggressor, and it's not too hard to win long games, especially if you can get multiple copies of this thing out. It just starts getting really crazy. Now, just because we're not playing Teferi doesn't mean that I'm not playing 5-mana cards that we have to play on our turn, because I still want to play a couple of copies of the Mirari Conjecture. You don't see this every day, but you do see it some days. I guess this is one of those days. You know, this helps you get more birds out of Mystic. This guarantees basically 2 turns worth of bird production, so there's at least that. But we're kind of porting this idea over from the Lich's Mastery deck, the Rainbow Lich deck. That deck likes to cycle sweepers like Settle the Wreckage over and over with Mirari Conjecture, and we're kind of doing the same thing. We're playing some sweepers in this deck, and this allows us to get them back, control the board as much as we need to and for as long as we need to, and then play Mystic and start taking over the game. Other stuff that this thing does include letting us get back spells that draw us cards. When we have a Mystic out, that's great, or maybe we're looking for a Mystic or a Sweeper or whatever. This allows us to get back, say, a Divination on the second turn, and cast it, get a bird out of Mystic, draw more cards to get more birds out of Mystic when we cast those spells. So this is a great engine for a lot of reasons, and we're actually porting over one important trick from the Rainbow Lich deck, and that's the 1 copy of Nature's Spiral that we're playing in the main deck. We run into this, it allows us to loop Conjecture. We can use it to get Conjecture back, play that, and then on the second turn we'll get Nature's Spiral back, so that when we get to Chapter 3, we can just get it right back with Nature's Spiral and keep doing that as long as the game lasts. It's a really, really cool trick, and allows us to get more birds, more sweepers, more card draw, more removal, more whatever we need. And when the game starts going really long, this is a great source of, like, you know, more birds. This loop is, you know, or just whatever spells you might need at any given time. So I really enjoyed this loop in Rainbow Lich, and I'm going to exploit it here too. But forget for a second about all of the sweepers and card draw and removal and stuff this can help you get back from your graveyard and get multiple uses out of. That's good enough, but this is also integral because it helps us get back one of the key win conditions for the deck, March of the Multitudes. This is one of the best reasons to play a Bant control deck in my mind, you know. Even if you don't have any creatures out, I keep trying to get this through to people. Everyone's always like, you gotta really take advantage of the Convoke on this. I don't really think you have to in a control deck, you know. We've already seen with Expansion Explosion in these red-blue decks that sometimes all you gotta do is stall the game out until turn 14. and just blow them out with a huge spell. This kind of works the same way, even if we don't have any creatures in play. Once we get to the very late game, this can just put like 6 or 7 lifelink dudes into play at the end of their turn. Sometimes it can even function as like a tool in combat. Not quite a settle the wreckage or anything, but still, you got enough mana, you can really wreck an opponent's combat step and gain a bunch of life, kill a few of their dudes with gang tackle blocks and stuff. There's a lot this can do for you, even if it's not winning you the game at the time. And thanks to the Mirari conjecture, we can get it back over and over if that's what we absolutely have to do. But once you get a little bit later on in the game, you can tap 2 or 3 birds, plus your Murmuring Mystic, whatever mana you have out, and suddenly you have 7 or 8 lifelink dudes, plus a bunch of birds when you untap. This gets you a bird when you cast it for what it's worth, so you'll always get 1 more token than what you actually paid for, and that token flies. That's pretty important. So, a lot of reasons this card's in the deck, but mostly, besides Mystic, it's our primary win condition. Now, virtually the entire rest of the deck, actually, I should cut the word virtually, I think the entire rest of the deck is removal, sweepers, counterspells, and card draw, the fundamental elements of a control deck. Now, we want a one-sided sweeper because we might have a field full of birds, we might have a field full of March the Multitude tokens or whatever, so we mostly want one-sided sweepers, and it's an instant. That's pretty sweet. I mean, obviously it has to be an instant to function the way it does, but it's pretty handy that this is a sweeper that Mirari Conjecture can get back. So do be careful with casting a whole bunch of settles in the game because you're going to give your opponent all the mana. My coffee maker going off. I don't know if you can hear that, but still be careful with your application of settle, but it can be very important during key combat steps. I mean, it's either give your opponent some mana or lose the game. You'll take give your opponent some mana every time. And you'll usually cast this more than once in the game. So, especially against fast aggro decks. But we're also going to play a copy of Cleansing Nova. Again, we don't want to wipe all of our birds or all of our, lifelink guys or anything. But sometimes we won't have that, especially by turn 5 or whatever. We won't have a field full of literally anything. So it's pretty safe to cast Cleansing Nova and have it as another panic button, another option against these fast aggro decks and even the mid-range decks. Once we do find our copy of Nova, then we can recycle it as needed with Mirari Conjecture. So sometimes we'll cast this a few times in a game. Sometimes it's all about getting to, turn 10 in this deck, and you'll cast Cleansing Nova once, cycle it with Mirari Conjecture, cast it again, settle the wreckages in there somewhere, and when you finally get to turn 10 or 11 and you've controlled the board as much as you need to, that's when you can start pulling the trigger on Mystic, March of the Multitudes, and all that stuff. So even though we don't want to wipe the board all the time, we will want to wipe the board enough to play at least the 1 main deck copy of Nova. But we got to play some spot removal in the deck too, so we're doing 4 copies of Seal Away. I shouldn't even have to tell you that. I mean, it's pretty obvious we played this card. This takes out everything from early stuff like a Danto Vanguard to late stuff like Lyra Dawnbringer. It's important against Rekindling Phoenix, exiles it forever. A lot of stuff this does. If they attack with Banalish Marshal, we can just wreck them with the Seal Away sometimes. So this is a really important card, and we'll play 4 copies. But we're also playing 2 copies of Conclave Tribunal in here. This could be Ixalan's Binding, but given the chance that we have to have some birds out or some, March guys, then occasionally this can be free, or we can just discount it 1 by tapping a bird or a mystic or something like that. So I think it's a little bit better than Binding, although I do like that extra clause on Binding that lets them not play whatever it is. Again, that's a good clause. So you go your own way on this. As far as I'm concerned, one may not be necessarily better than the other, but I went with Conclave Tribunal because we have a chance at getting a discount on it. We're also playing some counter spells in the deck because it's a control deck. I mean, not every control deck plays counters. It's kind of a misconception, but we are playing blue mana, so we should play counter spells. So we'll start with 3 copies of Syncopate. This is also important for taking out everything from early game stuff. This also can deal with the Danto Vanguard pretty early in the game, but this counters even late game stuff if you have the mana, and you do. I mean, we're a control deck. We're looking to play a land virtually every turn. So as long as we don't play anything on our turn, we'll virtually always have the mana for Syncopate, especially if we win first. Sometimes that can be really important. Going second makes Syncopate a lot worse, but still very doable, even in the middle turns of the game especially. Syncopate can be a very effective card, and it exiles important things in Golgari, exiles important things against Arclight Phoenix. There's a lot of play on Syncopate right now. Good early game counter, but even a decent late game counter. Now, we're also working in 3 copies of Essence Scatter here because I think this card is actually just kind of busted right now. You know, there's a bunch of decks that play 30-plus creatures in Standard right now. At time of recording, the de facto, quote, most important deck is Boros Aggro, which may change as soon as we get, like, results from this weekend starting to roll in. I'm, like, 58% sure that Boros Aggro probably won't be the most important deck after this weekend, but there's still going to be a bunch of people playing it. And a card like Essence Scatter is super effective against that deck, especially, again, if you go first. This counters Adanto Vanguard on that crucial turn, but it also counters every single game on curve, no matter, you know, if you're on the play or the draw. It's going to counter Benalish Marshal, Venerated Loxodon, Rekindling Phoenix, Lyra Dawnbringer, a bunch of really, really important creatures in Standard right now. So again, I think the card is half busted, and I'm going to play it because I don't think we have the mana for Sinister Sabotage in this deck. There's only like 14 blue sources in the deck, and it'd be possible to work in as many as 18 to consistently cast Sabotage, but then we'd lose out on some white sources. We'd lose out on green, which we don't care too much about, but I don't want to lose the white sources that are necessary to make this deck consistently able to cast double blue. So instead of casting Sinister Sabotage, I'll lean a little bit more heavily on stuff like Syncopate and Essence Scatter, and we'll play a copy of Negate for that matter. This does a lot in this deck. You know, this counters counterspells. That's going to be important a lot, but it also counters removal against Murmuring Mystic. We want to keep that out as long as we can. It counters things like, you know, Teferi against other decks. A lot of stuff. Vivian Reed, Experimental Frenzy. I mean, you can go on. History of Benalia. Negate counters a lot of very, very important cards in this deck or in this format, while still, you know, being able to carry out the function of protecting important stuff on our side of the board. So at least the one main deck copy of Negate is in order. Now, the rest is card draw, for all the reasons that Control plays card draw. You know, we want to be able to draw more lands, draw more answers. More importantly, we want to be able to restock our hand in the mid and late game so that we can get up on cards from our opponent. But in this deck, we also want to draw more cards so that we can hit those sweepers more consistently, so we can hit our Murmuring Mystics when we need to. Once we have our Mystics out, we want to draw cards so we can play more spells and get more birds. A lot of reasons to draw cards in this deck. So we'll start off with some jumpstart stuff. We're going to play 2 copies of Radical Idea here in the 2-drop slot. I don't love Radical Idea, to be honest with you, but this does a few things. You know, this fills out our curve in the 2-drop slot, if nothing else, especially against decks that don't play stuff for us to remove in the early game. Radical Idea can just be, into your turn, I'll draw a card, try to get an extra land, try to get another answer, counterspell, whatever. Try to draw into a Mystic. That'd be good. But once we have our Mystic out, this guarantees that we're able to both get a bird and draw a card so we can maybe cast more birds that same turn. So Radical Idea does an awful lot for the deck. But if you were going to play Teferi or Search for Escanta, which I also didn't play in this deck because I wanted to try out for once not playing Search. And I didn't want to like lose out on, you know, Murmuring Mystics and Mirari Conjectures and stuff while I'm trying to search. You know, I didn't want to have to put those on the bottom of my library. And also didn't want to pay $20 for one card. So there's that. But, you know, I didn't play those cards. If you wanted to cut Radical Idea and include some of those cards, it would make sense. But I really like these Jumpstart cards for both helping us get important stuff that we need to in the early and mid game, while still guaranteeing birds once we have Mystic down. I think it's important. So I'm also going to play 3 copies of Chemister's Insight here for the same reasons. You know, another reason, by the way, that I like Jumpstart in this deck is that it kind of works well with Mirari Conjecture. You know, if you want to jumpstart something, you can discard a spell, an instant or a sorcery, so you can jumpstart that card out of your graveyard. But you're not losing it forever. You've got Mirari Conjecture. You can just get it back once you play Conjecture. So cards that you discard for flashback, I did it again, for jumpstart, you're not losing forever, which I think is really, really cool. That's a good synergy. So definitely, you know, Radical Idea and Chemister's Insight, very similar cards. And they're in the deck for all the same reasons. But we'll cap things off here with a couple of copies of Divination. Just like Sinister Sabotage, I don't think we have the blue mana to cast Secrets of the Golden City. You could, because sometimes you won't cast your Divination spell until turn 5 or turn 6. But sometimes you need it on turn 3 so you can get the lands that you need to play the sweeper, or get the sweeper in the first place, get some counter spells to help protect yourselves on turn, you know, turn 4, turn 5, important turns in Standard. So there's lots of reasons to play Divination, but this is just another thing that helps you get, you know, more birds, draw cards to play more spells, get more birds off of Mystic. You can get it back with Mirari Conjecture. We need to play some amount of sorceries in the deck to get a little bit more play off of Conjecture. So I think Divination is the right choice for this slot. Now we're playing 26 lands in the deck. That's 18 white sources, 14 blue, and 10 green. 10 green is actually plenty. You know, we won't be playing March or even Nature's Spiral until very, very late in the game. So I think it's possible you could go down to 8 green sources and be fine with this mana base. And it looks expensive at first glance. I put the prices up so it kind of dispels that illusion a little bit, but at the same time, these are not very expensive dual lands right now. All of these can be gotten for about $5, including the Temple Garden, which is shocking but true. You know, be a little bit discriminate in looking at your vendors on TCG Player. See where you can get the best prices, because a lot of these are only $5 or even less right now, and that's actually not bad for a 3-color mana base with a bunch of dual lands. Now here's the board. Been doing a lot of budget stuff lately with super simple sideboards. We do one competitive deck and boom, here's a very complex sideboard. But it's actually a little bit more simple than it might look. A 4th copy of Syncopate for when we know we're going first in game 2. It's just basically the bottom line there. 3 copies of Negate against control decks. That's the bottom line there as well. Another copy of Essence Scatter against aggro decks. See how simple this is? A copy of Disdainful Stroke against decks like Green-Black and other decks that go really late into the game. Decks that want to play Lyra or Teferi. Disdainful Stroke is an important card. Invoke the Divine. This is mostly against, enchantments. We can bust artifacts with this, yeah. But against explosive... Why do I want to say explosive vegetation? Experimental Frenzy. This is a really important card. Bust their Frenzy and gains us a bunch of life back that we have definitely lost on attacks at that point in the game. And this kills a bunch of, Conclave Tribunal, Ixalan's Binding, Seal Away, a bunch of, white removal right now in the format. So important to have Invoke for when our Murmuring Mystic goes up under a white enchantment. We've also got that 4th copy of Settle, a 2nd copy of Cleansing Nova for when we know that we're up against nothing but aggro, We've also got Divine Visitation in there. This is mostly against Green-Black and again slow roll type of decks that take a while to cook. Divine Visitation can be great. We get a Murmuring Mystic in place. We play a March of the Multitudes and suddenly our board is full of 4/4 flyers they can do nothing about. So I really, really like Visitation. It looks a little bit win more, but sometimes it's just win faster, which you occasionally need against some of these decks. We've also got a Nezahal, play a Nezi against Control. What else do I need to say? But you may also notice the Lyra Dawnbringer. Now, I said that I didn't want to play $20 cards, but on the other hand...
I'm not stupid!
Thank you, Ed. That pretty much sums it up there. Against aggro, we're going to need a card like this to help just completely swing the game in our favor. If they can't answer Lyra Dawnbringer when it comes down on turn 5, they really don't have a whole lot of hope in most games. So I am going to play this card for just a breaker for the aggro matchup, because it's the best in Standard for doing that. Now let's take a look at the power rankings. We still manage a 66, despite, the absence of Teferi and Nexus of Fate and Search for Azcanta. Of course, if you just wanted to make traditional Bant control, I think that Nexus is a really, really good deck. It is, but we're all a little bit sick of it. We hate playing against it. Most of us even hate playing with it. I've profiled that deck. I've had to play with it for like 2 weeks, and I cannot stand playing that deck. This deck, however, is a lot more fun. Who would have known that it would be more fun to fill your board with a bunch of birds and lifelink guys and just win the game that way? Who would have known? I like tokens. But this deck is actually surprisingly effective at doing what it's supposed to do. We are slow rolling here. We're trying to outcard the opponent in the early and mid game. We're trying to trade 1-for-1 in the early game and then sweep their board, reset the game so that we can get down Mystics safely, get down Mirari Conjecture and start recycling sweepers safely. We can actually get to the point in the game where we're stalling until we get enough mana to really make the most use out of March of the Multitudes and Murmuring Mystic. Then we have gone a long way towards winning the game, and it's actually not too hard for this deck to do that, even against the most aggro of opponents. I mean, despite how wacky the deck might look, it still pulls off wins, It's a control deck. We're playing 10 different pieces of removal, 4 of which we can recycle. We're playing 7 different counter spells, all of which we can recycle. So the defense is still very real. All you're prioritizing is getting to the late game, and that's going to take some sweepers, some removal, some card draw. But this deck has it in spades. Plenty of all of those different elements a control deck needs to thrive, while still having a very, very strong late game once you do get your pieces in place. So I hope that you at least try this thing out, suspend your disbelief, and don't play Teferi for a minute and see how it works out for you. And if you did want to try it out, it's at least a lot more palatable for your wallet than a lot of control decks, period. I was going to say Bant control, but just control in this format. Always plays at least the 4 Teferis, it's just ridiculous how much the deck, it's like a $500 deck. This is not that. This is south of $200 over on TCG Player right now. It's only about $175, $180 to build this deck, if again you're a little discriminate with what vendors you choose once you actually get into the arena there. So go over, click the link in the description, the very first link down there in that box, and you'll go over to TCG Player. You can view the deck list at your leisure from there instead of having to watch me run my mouth for 20 minutes or whatever, however long we've been here. I had a lot to say about this deck, so it was probably a pretty long video at the end. But in any case, if you don't want to go through all that again, if you do, I'll be happy. View my content. But if you don't, you want a little streamlined version of this deck, click the link in the description, view the deck list on TCG Player, pick up any pieces that you might need. Helps out your boy when you do, but if you also want to help me out in other ways, you can check out the Patreon. It's just $1 a month at the lowest level to join, and at that level, I'll let you vote on what decks you want to see next, what videos you want to see next, and I'll let you know what decks we're doing 24 hours before I actually upload the video. A lot of value for $1. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested, kid. But aside from that, you can just like the video if you want to low effort, non-monetarily support me. That helps. Puts me in more recommended feeds. Like the video. Subscribe to the content if you haven't done it yet, because this is not the last weird deck that you probably want to see. This format, far from it. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for the notifications, and I'm pretty sure that's all I got for this one. Tapped out for now, but let me know how you felt about this one in the comments section. I imagine this will be a full comments section, so let me know how you felt about it. There's a lot to be said about this deck, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.